Hello there. Welcome to Theology in Motion. This is Eric here, and it's the morning of September 13th. And normally I don't timestamp videos, but I'm sharing this because, yesterday, if you follow social media or the hip hop news, um, there was a tragic incident in California where the local rapper from Philadelphia, PNB Rock, was robbed and murdered. And I've seen an outpouring of sentiment and even in my own home, family members, my daughter and I, she's a teenager, we've talked about it. Some years ago, my employer that I worked for was neighbors with PNB Rock. And I remember just having conversations about how, he doesn't fit the typical mold of a rapper. His content isn't, the kind of the violent drill rap. And I've never heard any of his songs, but he was well spoken of. And I had intended to make a video about evangelism and sharing the faith. And I want to continue with that because I believe in this moment and in many crisis moments in our life and our communities, the Lord positions us to share the hope that we have. First Peter 3:15 says that we are to sanctify the Lord God in our hearts and be ready always to give an answer of the hope that lies within us with meekness and fear. Some translations say gentleness and respect. Um, our heart is the temple, and the Lord is to fill it. It's to be holy. It's to be His place. And so I think that a lot of times we don't share the faith much because we don't preach the faith to ourselves. And when I say preach the gospel, I'm talking about um, using those truths and the goodness of the message of the gospel to dislodge the idols and the issues in our heart and to make us steadfast and sturdy when everything around is sinking. I'll probably make another video on that at some point. And so what I want to do is I want to go ahead and review how I approach sharing the gospel and also thinking through it and processing it in conversation. Um, my heart has been stirred from all that I saw last night. I actually went on YouTube to check on the news about PNB Rock because at first they were saying he hadn't passed, and I actually came across the video of right after he had been shot. And and I'm saying there's no graphic warning, there's nothing here. It's just how many other people saw that. And so all these things are in my mind. It's a very loaded moment for me emotionally, as I imagine it is for many others. And so with that being said, I want to share this video and I want to just walk us through Choung's four circles. It is probably for the last decade how I prefer to share my faith, how I engage in conversations. It's kind of the rubric I use. So with that being said, I'm gonna share a screen, and I'll just stop along the way a little bit, and we'll kind of talk through it. If you have questions, definitely comment below. Um, there will be some follow-ups. I already know that, but so let's get into this.
Tell me what the world's like. When you turn on the news, what do you see? Well, between all the violence and war and terrorism and the AIDS pandemic and global warming, we've got to say our world's pretty messed up. What's interesting is how we feel about that. None of us think that that's a great thing. All of us long and ache for a better world. Well, isn't that
So I'll say I won't stop a whole lot, but in conversation, just like in devotional with my daughter today, one of the things I would bring up if I were starting right here with PNB Rock is this outpouring. How is it that people in California, Philadelphia, Canada, the United Kingdom, um, parts of Southeast Asia, so upset over what happened to PNB Rock that this celebrity who came off as very innocent, very not like a rapper. Why are people so upset? Because there's a sense of righteous indignation. There's in this sense that this is a guy who's much like me. He didn't deserve this. He didn't call out anybody in his rap music. There's a sense that innocence has been betrayed. And it's where I would argue that that's because we are made in God's image. Humanity for sure became a train wreck, but there is still the mark of God's image, the imprint. His morality, his ethics is still stamped in us. And we know that this is wrong. And there's a part of us that wants justice and we want things to be made right. And so when I'm sharing my faith, I'm usually trying to begin with that common ground with what we see. And it's not always easy. There's different kind of people. There's some people who will just deny everything, and everything is all great, and then some people everything is all bad. But that's why we want to become good listeners. If we would share our faith, if we would share the hope of Jesus, you got to listen. It's not to say you spend all your time trying to counsel a person, but it is to say you have to listen in order to contextualize the gospel message. Let's keep going.
And interesting because hunger seems to point to the fact that food exists, and thirst points to the fact that water or drink exists. So our longing and aching for a better world seems to point to the fact that either a better world did exist or will one day exist. Well, in the Christian worldview, we believe it did, and that back in the day, God designed it so that the planet took care of us and we took care of it, and we took care of each other, and God took care of us and we blessed him back, and that the whole thing was designed for
He's bringing in the
good.
design, what
So how
God
did we get
designed.
here? Well, we decided that we were going to run the show, and when we started chasing our own needs above caring for other people or the planet, we started damaging the planet, we started damaging our relationship with each other, and ultimately we damaged our relationship with God, so that the whole thing was damaged by evil. Well, it's great that God actually loves the planet and us too much to leave us that way. So even in our brokenness, in the Christian worldview, 2,000 years ago, God came as Jesus. And in that, he started to teach us a better way to live. And
Let me just interject there. One of the things I try to emphasize when I'm just talking, again, we don't even have to call it evangelism. Some people will talk about a stage of pre-evangelism. Uh, I like to emphasize and show people how Christianity is unique, how our God is an initiator, right? If I want you to despair of your sin, I want you to despair of the fact that you can't save yourself, right? I want you to see that you can't make yourself better. And every attempt that we have for looking for change, there's two categories. There are those who are pursuing change for society, change for politics, change for the environment, but then there are those who are looking for lasting change, right? What God is doing, what God is working out, what Christ has secured on the cross will be lasting and permanent change. I always want to emphasize that because Christianity is not just a some social movement. It's not a plan for behavior modification. It's not a plan for how do we rescue the environment so that we would be this Tower of Babel society where we make a name for ourselves. It is that we were dead. We have been rescued by him. He is rescuing the world around us. He reigns. He is not weak and unable. And he saves and he is a restorer. And so I always want to show the uniqueness of Christ. I'm going to preach to myself how Jesus is unique, how he is not like the idols that I've served and the ones that vie for my heart's attention every day. Let's keep going.
began to tell us about this thing called the reign of God, where all the good things that's supposed to happen actually do. And so he taught us, and in his death, all this crap died with him, so that 3 days later, when he came back to life, there's new life possible throughout everything, throughout the planet, in us, and with each other. And so everything is being restored for better. Well, then what's our response? Well, in this world, that's still messed up. Jesus is starting a revolution, and he's asking
I like
us
that. Revolution.
to be healed ourselves in Jesus' name, to be healed in each other, and to go out and heal the planet. And that our mission is to be sent together to heal.
Sent together to heal is what he's saying. This is significant because sometimes we share our faith and we fall short in two ways. Number one, we share our church information, but not Jesus. We try to get people an introduction and we say, oh, you should come hear my pastor. He's got a word for you. Or you should come to my church. We're doing all this different outreach. Very nice. But you want to make sure that you leave Christ with them. And you do want to give an action plan. I always want to have a follow-up routine. Hey, can we talk tomorrow after work around 5 or 6? How's that? Do you want to inbox me on Facebook tonight? We can keep this conversation going. I always want to have an action plan. But then I also want to paint a picture. It's going to be very hard for you to preach a westernized individual Jesus and tell somebody that they're called to be sent. And this generation, millennials and Gen Z, want to be sent. They want a sense of mission. You can't give them the as long as I have Jesus, don't need nobody else gospel. You can't give them the I can have Jesus at home in my bed on Sunday morning. I'll just turn on BET or TBN or whatever on YouTube. There has to be more. And this is why we have to examine ourselves daily. This is why we have to preach the gospel to ourselves. That healing is not just a Holy Spirit comes to me and now I'm being healed and restored. It's I need community, and that community needs me, right? Some years ago, I took a class with the Chalmers Institute, and I remember there was this illustration they gave us. They said too many churches have a soup kitchen mentality. We've got something we've got to give everybody, and we just want to get them here so we can give it. And they said what churches should adopt is a crockpot mentality that, hey, we want everybody to come and bring something because everybody has something worthwhile. So when I'm sharing the faith, again, I don't ever expect it to just be one conversation. My goal is not that you'll come and visit my church. My goal is that we'll do life on life and that you'll come be a part of my church. But if you're away, you're a college student, you're going to be somewhere else, I want to keep that connection with you because I want you to know Christ and to serve him and to suffer for him well. Very different than what we typically say in the West.
You. Now, how come I can't just jump from here to here? This sounds great. Well, the world's problems are infinite, and we're going to get overwhelmed trying to take care of this on our own. So we actually need Jesus' resources so that we can become the kind of good that we want to see on the planet. And that's crucial. So where are you? Are you here, where you think the world is peachy? Or here, overwhelmed by the world's problems? Or are you here, got some sense of God working in your life, but not involved in his mission? Or you're here, you're trying to actually make this world a better place, relationships and you and everything, but have a hard time finding how God fits into the picture. Where are you? If you chose this circle and you think the world is peachy, well, we've already talked about how the world is pretty messed up, so you'd be avoiding reality. The invitation for you is to see the world as it really is. But some of you chose this circle because you're overwhelmed by the evil in the world and even the evil in your own heart. Jesus responds by offering us two great things, hope and forgiveness. In hope, Jesus and his followers have been at the forefront of almost every great social movement that was for good in the past 2,000 years. Stuff like human rights, civil rights, public education, women's suffrage, the abolitionist movement, rights for the disabled. These are all things that were spearheaded by Christians.
You will generally enter into apologetics when you're sharing your faith to any degree. I think in any community in America, there are many I talk to that'll talk about Christianity as a white man's religion. They'll bring about social change, and for some reason, the generation that I encounter now, or the times that we live in, because it's just not a millennial thing, people have a short memory, and they act like Christianity just came about 30 years ago and never did anything. And so it may be maybe for a season for you, maybe you have questions. It's a good idea. Maybe study church history. I have some recommendations. There's an audiobook I'm reading on church history now. It's really good. I'll put the link in the description below. Maybe there's some questions you should ask your pastor about the history of the church, the history of missions, um, great things that people in the church have done. For some, all they know is slavery, Republicans, and scandal. And I think that is partly because we have an enemy that is very good at assassinating the character of the church. And another part of it is that we have um, those among us who don't do too much to help us. I'll put it that way. And so consider, build up your library, take those questions that you hear people with and answer them and let me help you. When you're sharing your faith, people are going to bring up some things that you're not going to have an answer to. Here's your way of dealing with it. Number one, don't lie. Number two, say, I want to get an answer for you. Would you let me do some research and come back and follow up? It's good to be honest, to show some integrity. Don't try to fluff it and say you just have to believe. Don't do that. Let them know what Jesus offers. Let them know what their need is. That's very basic. Everybody should be able to do that. but then be willing to come back and discuss these hard things on how do I deal with church hurt, how do I deal with church scandal, and how do I see a God who reigns over a mess called the church?
The only exception that I can think of is Gandhi and nonviolent resistance. But even he got his idea from Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus and his followers have been on this movement for the past 2,000 years. And in the end of time, we will all live in a world where this evil no longer exists. That's the hope. But there's also forgiveness. We all know the junk in our hearts, and through Jesus and the cross and his resurrection, he offers us forgiveness so that we can join this movement without guilt or shame. Some of us chose this circle because we're followers of Jesus, but we're not a part of this, healing the world. And Jesus wants to make it clear that if we're not a part of this, then we're a part of this. And
Exactly.
we've made faith about what we can get out of it and what it can do for us. And in so doing, we're the exact opposite of loving God and loving our neighbor. Some of us chose this because we want to be a part of healing the world, but we don't know how Jesus or spirituality fits into all that. And the rub is this. There is a lot of evil in the world, and the only way to give lasting response, lasting good in a context of evil is through love. We can't do it through our anger. We can't do it through our hatred. We can't do it through our pride or our fears. We have to do it through love. And Jesus, in his love for us, offers us a chance to be fully loved in ourselves, and in that, for that to spread out into our relationships and in our attitude.
I'm going to pause there. One thing I like to emphasize, not only is Christianity unique, not only is the gospel message unique, but we have to qualify terms. Make sure, when you're talking about love, some people don't understand what that means. To some people, love is broken promises and inconsistent behavior. And so what God did was he set out a plan in Genesis 3 that we read. He knew it beforehand, but he lays out and he works throughout history, redemptive history, um, to get the stage set for Christ to come. And Christ comes and does everything he said he would do, and now he's working out the New Testament. We want to show people and explain to them that love from God's perspective is not the love we know in society. Never assume people understand words from a biblical worldview. They do not. We always want to make that clear to them. And sometimes you even have to pause. Does that make sense? How do you explain love? How do you understand love? And sometimes they might go to a tangent, so you make sure you bring them back, but you want to hear them out because you got to hear where they are.
Toward the world. And so in through Jesus, we can become the greatest lovers on the planet. And in so doing, we can bring the greatest amount of good. No matter which circle you chose, Jesus wants us to respond in two ways. First, he wants us to have a change of mind, a complete shift in perspective, to say that we don't want to live like this anymore, and we see it your way, and we ask Jesus for forgiveness. We're sorry for living this way. And not only do we have a change in perspective, Jesus also wants us to trust him, to trust his way of seeing the world, to trust what he's doing in the world, to trust him, and ultimately to trust him so much to allow him to be the leader of our lives so that he can change us on the inside, and he can change our relationships, and he can bring healing to the world through us. So how does it sound? Do you want Jesus to be the leader of your life?
All right, there we have it. Choung's four circles. Again, guys, I know there's plenty of ways you can share the faith. Um, this is just one a method I use. Sound off on what you use. Um, put any questions or comments below. I just know that, and I want to remind us, we are surrounded by people who are hurting, and we're surrounded by people who are doing the hurting as well. We're in a broken world. It's messed up, and Jesus still reigns, and he is working, and he is ruling. So we have to remind ourselves that every day. We have to remind people of that. That's what our role in the church is, to spur one another on to good works. So that being said, I'm going to cut this short. We're almost at 20 minutes. This was supposed to be a shorter video, but keep everybody in prayer. I pray for you. I pray for every listener here. But I pray that we would all have opportunity to share the faith and multiply, as Christ has called us to do. So until next time, you guys take care of yourselves and each other. God bless you.